Day by day our lives are turning, like a potter's wheel they spin. You are choosing your own maker. Choose your potter's wheel, my friend.
The prolepsis. It's not a painful medical condition. Actually, it's a pretty simple figure of speech. I commonly use this figure when I speak of Abraham being called out of Ur. Someone may say, Bob, he was known as Abram when he was called out of Ur of the Chaldees. Well, that's true, but I'm using a prolepsis. Although he was known as Abram at that time, I call him by his popular name, since we don't typically call him Abram. A careful reading of Genesis will present the use of prolepsis in several cases. So what is a prolepsis? Well, it's kind of an anachronism, or details in the wrong order, to make a story easier and to more quickly understand it. Technically, a prolepsis is an anticipation of an argument or the need to offer details ahead of time. The prolepsis may present facts or details as if they were around before they existed. Nothing wrong with that when it's for the purpose of clarifying people, places, or things. Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all the living. This is in Genesis 3:20. However, she had no children at that time, but Moses writes this looking back to make an observation on the name given so the reader understands the natural intention. Genesis 12:8 has Abraham pitching his tent between Bethel and Ai, and later coming back to that place in Genesis 13, verses 3 and 4. Bethel was not yet called Bethel until after Abraham died in Genesis 25. And it was his grandson who later called it by that name in Genesis 28, verses 18 and 19. You see, it helps to know that the first readers of Genesis were Israelites after the Exodus from Egypt. They were being given the later names for easy identification with the way things were in their present time. Jesus used the prolepsis in Matthew 3:9, anticipating an argument by his listeners. Paul used the prolepsis quite often, asking questions his readers might use to object and then answering them. Another common figure of speech is irony. Irony is an expression intended to convey the exact opposite of what it seems to say. A very common use of irony is sarcasm. Irony can be broken down into various types, but we're simply going to offer a few examples to help you recognize it when encountered. God used irony to rebuke people. For example, God told Israel to seek help from the gods they had been worshiping in Judges 10 and verse 14. He was not telling them that those gods really existed or that they could even help. God asked Job and his friends where they were when he created the heavens and the earth in Job 38, beginning at verse 4. They did not exist at that time, and everyone knew it. But God makes a point about his power and their ignorance by asking these questions. Solomon told the young to follow their impulses and desires in Ecclesiastes 11:9. But he goes on in the next verse to make it clear where that will lead them. Pilate engaged in irony, in sarcasm, when he asked the question, "What is truth?" John 18:38. Pilate didn't wait for an answer because he didn't believe Jesus had the answer, nor did he believe it could be known. He was asking the question in derision, frustrated at the situation into which he had been thrust. As Paul wrote to the Corinthians the second time, he asked their forgiveness for having been such a benefactor to them. It's in 2 Corinthians 12:13. He had done them no wrong, but sarcastically pointed out the great benefit that he had given them. My favorite use of irony in Scripture is found in the confrontation between the prophet Micaiah and Ahab, king of Israel. This is in 1 Kings 22. I've already pointed this out in videos 15 and 45, so I won't rechew it, but here are a couple of links if you missed that. Well, our time is up. In our next video, we're going to talk about the allegory. It's a fantastic approach to teaching, and we'll spend a little time talking about the hazards of using it to interpret. I hope you'll join me for that study.